Hello and welcome to this webinar titled Firing Up Your Employability and Building Your Personal Brand. Before we get into the crux of the webinar, I'll be going through what Rate My Placement is and what services are on offer for students. So firstly, a bit of context. So Rate My Placement was founded back in 2006 and launched officially in 2007. Here you can see the two co-founders, Ali and Ollie. They were actually students at the time that the idea of Rate My Placement was born. And after struggling to find relevant placements that allow them to develop in a professional capacity, they noticed that the undergraduate employment market was essentially broken. And so the idea to build a digital platform that allowed students not only to access placement, internship, and insight opportunities, but also to read reviews of existing companies was born. At the centre of their vision was to create the means through which ambitious and career-focused students could take the first steps in their careers. And 13 years later, here we are. Rate My Placement is a website created by students for students. It's also the go-to website for students looking for work experience and the UK's leading undergraduate jobs board. So how is this relevant to you? How can Rate My Placement help you land your dream job? So first and foremost, Rate My Placement is a review platform. So think of it like the TripAdvisor of undergraduate work experience. There are over 63,000 reviews submitted by previous interns, placement students, and Insight Day participants. So it's a great resource for anyone looking for further insights into what work experience with particular companies looks like. On the screen is an example of part of a review left by a past student who interned with Bloomberg. You can actually read all the reviews or select specific reviews by employer at ratemyplacement.co.uk. You can also search for thousands of jobs and directly apply through the website. So Rate My Placement advertises over 1,500 paid jobs each year with over 300 different companies. So whether it's a year-long placement, a summer internship, or a short-term insight or vacation scheme that you're looking for, there's bound to be opportunities that are relevant to you and the industry you'd like to pursue a career in. You can also search by Rate My Placement's top 100 employers, and these are based on the student-submitted reviews that I mentioned earlier. So here are a few examples of the kind of companies advertised on the website. Now, as you can see, most industries are covered here. So whether it's engineering, IT, finance, pharmaceuticals, business, or, well, quite frankly, any other sector you'd like to get into, ratemyplacement.co.uk is a great place to start your search and begin making those first steps in applying. And it doesn't stop there. So there's also over 130 advice articles that are quite literally brimming with industry insights, helpful application tips, and downloadable CV and cover letter templates. So these are great resources to help support you throughout the application process. So make sure to check that one out as well. So now we get to the part of the webinar, which I'm sure you've all been eagerly waiting for, firing up your employability, building your personal brand. Whether you're a third-year student seeking graduate employment or a first or second-year university student aspiring to push yourself up the career ladder through work experience, developing an attractive personal brand is key to getting ahead, especially during this time of economic uncertainty. The remainder of this webinar is aimed primarily at those wanting some key insights on how they can build their brand and demonstrate it in interviews, at networking events, and in conversations with potential employers. But before we get to that, it'd be handy to put a name to the voice. Well, that's me right there on the slide. My name is Shoaib. I'm a marketing assistant working in early talent recruitment. I'm also a placement student at R&P Enterprise. That is the umbrella company which houses Rate My Placement. So hopefully my insights and experiences as a placement student will help any other aspiring placement students out there to get ahead. So let's kick things off with that age-old question. What is a personal brand? So a common mistake that students make is that they think a personal brand concerns how you present yourself to others, almost like an exterior that one might deploy in certain scenarios to appear favourable. However, that's not quite the case. A personal brand is more than just an image. It's more accurately the intersection of how you present yourself and how others perceive you. Why is this important? Well, your personal brand is a marketing tool that can be used to build a reputation that is favourable to an employer, and you and your skill set are the products to be marketed. And therefore, your personal brand is the means through which you are able to get ahead and stand out in what is quite honestly one of the most saturated graduate markets ever seen. So the term personal brand was actually first coined by Tom Peters, and he argues that we're all CEOs of our own personal brand, and that means we must market ourselves just as vigorously as any product or service. So you're probably thinking, what qualities are essential to cultivating a strong personal brand, and how can you demonstrate these to get ahead? So the first key ingredient I like to discuss is authenticity, the idea of embracing your real and honest self. As William Arruda says here, perhaps the biggest misconception about personal branding is the belief that it means creating an image, yet nothing could be further from the truth. I know that it can be tempting to change yourself to fit the criteria that you may think an employer is looking for, but trying to sell yourself as a perfect candidate will actually come across as disingenuous. There's no job advert out there that expects candidates who apply to tick every single box perfectly, and that's okay if you don't. So what does practicing authority look like? Well, firstly, it's important to keep things simple. If you're writing a CV or being interviewed for an internship, don't pretend to be something you're not. Avoid hyperbolic language. And that is language that is likely not part of your everyday vocabulary. Often language that's more complex or a more sophisticated way of saying things. Using this kind of extravagant and unnecessary language to communicate ideas or describe yourself in a way that tries to make you appear intelligent doesn't work. An employer can see right through this. And this feeds into being honest, being clear about your strengths and your weaknesses. Acknowledging areas for development shows that you are self-aware and reflective, and those are two highly sought-after soft skills that employers are increasingly looking for. By being honest, you will be acting with integrity, and that also means you should never exaggerate your strengths or say that you're skilled in a particular area if you're not. You will eventually get caught out, and this will eventually cause your personal brand to quickly collapse. And to sum things up, your ability to act authentically means you have good evaluation skills. And this is another top soft skill that employers are looking for. You can really show this off in an interview when asked if you have any questions. So one way to answer this question, if an employer asks if you do have those questions, is to identify an area that you can develop in. And then ask that potential employer what opportunities there are available to you to do so. That shows you're proactively seeking to improve and develop yourself, something again that employers are really looking for. Another key ingredient for a sound personal brand is to be a creator, but don't worry, that doesn't mean you have to be a creative genius. It's also important to recognise that content creation is more than just blog writing or creating a video or sharing a particular design. It's about creating noise around who you are and what you have to offer. So this quote nicely summarises this. You don't have to reinvent the wheel, you just need to share your unique perspective on why the wheel is important in the first place. Now, the aim of any content is to be disruptive. How can you attract people to your content, whether that's a LinkedIn post or an event you've simply organised, or perhaps even your CV? Then, how can you convince them to engage with that content and from it take action? One way to do this is by capitalising on your uniqueness. We all have individual experiences, backgrounds, and insights to offer that nobody else can provide. So mould your content to highlight the originality that you as an individual can offer. Remember that all the content you produce needs to be relevant, insightful, and offer something of value to the industry. So remember not to create content purely for the sake of it. What is the purpose and how can it benefit you, but also how can your content work for your peers? Now, here is a great example of disruptive content. Some of you may have heard of Mark Manson or perhaps even read his book. So firstly, who is he? Well, he began as a blogger from his university bedroom, creating witty articles about his life and what he was witnessing around him. Since then, he's become a self-help author and entrepreneur with 3 best-selling books, a podcast, and an audio and video subscription service for consumers of his content. So how did he build his personal brand so successfully? Well, firstly, he identified something he could offer of value. His wit, casual, laid-back attitude, and blatant honesty were essential ingredients in his brand. His messaging was disruptive by nature. It was enough to make people listen, and therefore there was a demand for his content. He then found an appropriate platform to share this messaging. So it initially was in blog form, but later he's expanded to video and audio content. Essentially, Mark was able to build the marketing platforms through which he began to market himself. And that can be seen through his self-titled website. And that's when you know your personal branding works. Another key ingredient to building a great personal brand is networking. So building your network both online and offline. It's great to have original content to share, but without the audience of useful contacts that you can acquire over time, you won't necessarily be able to create the noise around your work. And that is why networking, and more importantly, networking right, is so essential. Some questions to think about now. So, firstly, have you attended a networking event? And secondly, are you an active LinkedIn user? Now, you might say yes to this question at first, but being active means you regularly engage with your connections. You're seeking new connections and you sharing fresh content. And that's something that a lot of students forget to do once their LinkedIn profile is established, but it's incredibly important. And that's because 85% of jobs are filled through networking. And that can be at a recruitment fair, jobs market, LinkedIn, or any other scenario where you might be exposed to potential contacts of value to your career. Now, despite that high percentage, 1 in 4 people do not network at all. And if that's you, here are some top tips. So firstly, when seeking contacts, whether that's offline at a careers fair or online through LinkedIn, be selective. You don't have the time or need to speak to everyone. Aspire to build a relationship with people or businesses who are relevant to your career aspirations and can help you achieve your career objectives. Aim for quality connections over numerical following. This isn't Instagram. Quality over quantity. Secondly, if you meet a useful contact offline, say at a jobs market or careers fair, ask for the contact details so you can continue that dialogue later. You can do this via a LinkedIn message or by dropping them an email. Your aim? Well, you should focus on reintroducing yourself and reiterating how you can both work together. Let them know why they need you in their contact list. And my third top tip for networking concerns those that you meet during the job application process. So continue the dialogue with recruiters and employers, even if you're unsuccessful. Send a follow-up email expressing gratitude and the opportunity that you've been given, and always ask for feedback. By doing so, you're showing that you're proactive and seeking to self-improve. You never know when such a contact may come in handy in the future, and chances are, if there are any future vacancies, you'll be at an advantage based on how you dealt with past rejection. And here's a quote to summarise what should always be at the top of your mind when networking. So Catherine Hansen rightly insists that you should be sure to tell every contact you come across in a concise way exactly what you want to do and what you can offer. And that's really important. They are the 2 points you should always cover when networking. Now, the next key ingredient for a solid personal brand is building authority. This allows you to gain credibility in your field and therefore become recognisable as a thought leader with something to say of value and worth. Now, Tom Peters insists that authority isn't something you assign to yourself. It comes through hard work and the recognition by a group you hope to influence that you have something important to give, to do, or to say. Authority is both a product of a good personal brand, but it's also an ingredient that elevates that personal brand from good to great. Now, here's a great example of somebody who has gained credibility in their field. Ibrahim Mohammed, or more commonly known as Ibsmo, is a student influencer and YouTuber. Here he features in a BBC News article celebrating his graduation. Now, you're probably wondering, How has a student graduating managed to receive national press coverage? Well, Ibn has cultivated a personal brand that positions him as a thought leader in his field. And that's because he's identified an important issue that he specifically could comment upon with authority. And that was the issue of diversity and inclusion in Uxbridge. As a person of colour from a low-income household and who received free school meals, Ibn has used his story of breaking barriers as a Cambridge University student to enact and implement change. He's advocated for more inclusivity in higher education, pushing for programmes that increase the accessibility of such institutions for young people from backgrounds similar to his own. Now, by using his platform to and create content that champions social mobility, Ibn has become a thought leader in the field of access, diversity, and inclusion within education. So it's worth thinking about a number of questions here. Firstly, how can you use your story to speak with authority on a particular topic? What areas can you offer a contribution to based on your personal experiences, traits, and identity? How can your insights contribute to wider discussion? And then finally, how can you share these ideas through disruptive content creation? There's something for you to think about. Now, another key ingredient to building a great personal brand is storytelling. You should incorporate storytelling in every point of interaction if you're trying to sell yourself to an employer. So whether that be a job application, the conversation you have whilst networking, or at an interview, always incorporate some sort of story to demonstrate your growth and your development. Storytelling is how to speak on your journey. It should be used to comment on the barriers you've broken and the challenges that you've overcome to be where you are today. It's also good to recognise moments of failure and use that to demonstrate your resilience. So when used effectively, storytelling is an incredibly good way to show off your ability to self-reflect, self-evaluate, and learn from past errors. Now here's a short video that I think nicely encapsulates the value of storytelling.
Storytelling is the oldest art form, and it's what distinguishes us from other living beings. Who doesn't like a good book? Who doesn't like a great movie? Storytelling is universal. It is what has united us through time. I'm Sarah Austin Janess, and I'm the executive producer of The Moth, and I help people craft their stories. I've always been curious about the world, and I think stories really help us connect with each other. The stories are all unique, very different. When I'm working with people on stories, I say, well, why can only you tell this story? I tell people, consider what your story is about in only one sentence. Who are you in the beginning and at the end, and really what is the change? It's some sort of a journey, so you have to know your first line, know your last line, know the basic bullet points in between. You're really picking and choosing which elements from your life and which experiences best illustrate a certain part of your character. You're really showing someone what it's like to be you. And stories reveal some part of you that otherwise might go unseen. You can use stories everywhere. If you're going on a job interview, what do you want the person to really know about you? What kind of experience have you had in your life or in your work that illustrates that? And the most important thing is not just the successes, but also the struggles or the time that you wished that you could work for something, but it was just not availing itself to you. Stories make us feel less alone because they're about fundamental human feelings. We say that at The Moth, we celebrate the commonality and the diversity of the human experience. So I've seen people use personal stories to open up any kind of a discussion to very quickly level everyone, unite everyone, and help people have a shared experience. What makes for a powerful story? You have to have stakes, so we have to know why you care about this, as long as you have something that you're fighting for or you're struggling with. I think people are going to hang on until the end. A well-told story helps you stand out, and a well-told story differentiates you from the pack. And that's the goal of an interview in the first place.
So, to summarise, Everyone loves storytelling for two main reasons. So, firstly, it makes you personable, and brands with personality are the ones that people warm to, and more importantly, the ones that people remember. By sharing your struggles, you can support others on a similar journey. You can become a figure of influence and inspiration. And this was nicely demonstrated in the previous example of Ibsmo sharing his own personal struggles and experiences to push forward change. Now, the sixth key ingredient to building your brand for employability is originality. Specifically, looking at thinking outside the box enough to stand out when applying for work experience or graduate jobs. So, how can you be original? And what can you do to ensure employers remember you? Well, here are three fab examples from students who applied for the Boohoo internship program. You can clearly see the thought, the effort, the time that has gone into these CVs. And yes, these are CVs, obviously not the traditional black and white paper copy, of course. Rather, these applicants have actually gone above and beyond what was expected of them. They've taken this opportunity to produce original content that creatively demonstrates the ways in which they fit into the company. Rather than just describing why they're suitable for the role, they've told a story through their CV, exhibiting the values that are required for this program. Now, these are just some ways to stand out. I'm not suggesting that for every CV you write, you produce a balloon that, when popped, unveils your CV. Rather, use this as inspiration to see how people are being increasingly innovative to get ahead of the competition. And remember that your two aims in any application process are: one, to ensure an employer remembers you and your application, and two, to drive the employer towards hiring you. And going beyond the expected norm is a great way to achieve these two objectives. The next key ingredient is consistency. You might be surprised to hear that actually 70% of employers use social media to screen candidates before their interviews. And that's why your offline and digital personas must be consistent. So the way you would present yourself to an employer at an interview must match your online presence. Now, time after time, employers meet great candidates. But if those candidates have undesirable digital footprints, their brands fall apart very quickly. So, why is it important to have that consistency across your online and offline image? Well, firstly, it is to ensure that what your employer sees when they search you online matches what you present to them when speaking in person. If you appear professional in person, but your social media is littered with a backlog of questionable photos, comments, or videos, then your brand collapses. Being consistent, especially in terms of content creation and sharing, also shows your commitment to the industry. This strongly demonstrates your passion to achieve success in your field. And how does that help build your brand? Well, your writing voice, your online image, and your area of expertise become quickly recognizable. Over time, if you're consistent, you'll become someone that people look to for content and for insights. Jason Hartman nicely summarizes this. He says, your personal brand is a promise to your clients, a promise of quality, consistency, competency, and reliability. And your clients, in this sense, can be seen as perhaps an employer or someone you're speaking to at a job market, or maybe your interviewer. Okay, let's move on. Finally, self-awareness is a key ingredient to making your brand work. So it's important to better yourself or improve any aspect of your life. And it's actually possible to do this without self-awareness. And that's just as important in your career. In fact, self-awareness is a soft skill that employers time and time again say that students lack. So being self-aware goes hand in hand with adaptability, another top soft skill that employers are looking for. So think about where your strengths lie. What are you good at? What skills do you have to really offer a business and help them innovate? Similarly, think about areas that you're lacking in. Where can you make improvements? And it's by making those improvements, you'll become a better candidate. Throughout the application process, you should aspire to develop your own style. Figure out what works for you and mold the process to match your strengths. And it's only by being reflective and self-evaluating, being aware and adapting to your surroundings, that you'll be able to make these improvements to help build your brand for the better. So there you go, there they are. 8 key ingredients to help you build your personal brand and fire up your employability. Now remember that all 8 ingredients fit together and complement one another. So think about these things. What skills do you have based on personal experiences and your own development pathway? How are you going to package your insights and offerings in a way that is original and engaging? What are the platforms that you'll use to share your content and get your brand heard? Remember, it's about making noise, standing out. How frequently will you share your content, and is this content consistent across all your activities? And that's it from me. Thank you for listening to this webinar, and don't forget to follow Rate My Placement across all their social media channels for more content. There are plenty of resources available to students at this time, so make sure you head to the website ratemyplacement.co.uk for more information.